The ham was glazed. 2 casseroles were waiting in my refrigerator, and a bicycle stood hidden beneath a sheet in my garage when Facebook showed me that Christmas was happening without me. My grandchildren were wearing matching red pajamas beneath a stone fireplace I had never seen. My daughter Sarah stood beside her husband and his parents, smiling beneath a banner announcing that the whole family was together. For 11 years, Christmas had been held at my modest Ohio house. I cooked the meal, hung the stockings, bought the groceries, and kept the traditions alive after my wife, Diane, died just 1 week earlier. Sarah had still asked me to prepare everyone's favorite side dishes and buy the children's big Santa gifts. When I called, she went quiet before saying, "His parents have a nicer house. We thought you wouldn't care where we celebrated." I was 58, a high school history teacher, and apparently useful enough to supply Christmas, but not welcome enough to attend it. I didn't yell. I asked one question. "What time did you decide I wasn't coming?" Sarah claimed there had never been a specific moment. Then she said Jason could stop by around noon to collect the food and presents. "No," I told her, "don't send him." I didn't drive across town or make a scene. I made one phone call and changed where my Christmas would be spent. By dinner, I had 7 missed calls demanding to know where the dishes and gifts were. The next morning, my son-in-law's mother called to apologize. She had been told that grief made Christmas gatherings too difficult for me, and that I had chosen to stay home. No one had forgotten to invite me. They had deliberately removed me, scheduled my generosity anyway, and counted on my decency to hide what they had done. My name is Mark Dalton. I teach American history at a public high school outside Dayton, where I have spent 32 years explaining that major events usually begin with ordinary people making small choices they believe won't matter. My wife, Diane, used to laugh when I brought that line home. She said every teacher eventually turns his subject into a philosophy of life. Diane had been the heart of our Christmases. She made cinnamon rolls before sunrise, played old Motown records while she cooked, and labeled every gift in handwriting so neat it looked printed. When cancer took her 12 years ago, our daughter Sarah was 24 and newly married. That first December, Sarah offered to cancel Christmas. I couldn't bear that. Canceling felt too much like allowing the illness to take one more thing after Diane was gone. So I learned the cinnamon rolls. Mine came out uneven, and I burned the first pan. But we kept going. Sarah and Jason came over. Later, when their children, Emma and Luke, were born, my house became the place with the stockings, the wooden train around the tree, and the height marks penciled inside the pantry door. I never minded doing most of the work. At least, I told myself I didn't. Teachers aren't rich. But my mortgage was nearly paid off, and Christmas was the one time of year I spent without looking too closely at the total. Sarah would bring a salad. Jason might carry folding chairs up from the basement. His parents, Robert and Linda Mercer, sometimes joined us for dessert. The Mercers had more money than I did. Robert owned several dental practices before retiring. Their old house had been comfortable. Their new one, completed that fall, looked like something from a real estate magazine. Sarah had shown me pictures of the double staircase and the kitchen island that was almost as large as my first apartment. I wasn't jealous. A large house is useful if you have a large family. I had even told Sarah it might be nice for Linda to host something once she settled in. But something wasn't the same as a Christmas, where everyone was invited except me. The week before Christmas, Sarah stopped by after school while I was grading final essays at my dining room table. She had a paper cup of coffee for me and a list on her phone. "Jason's swamped at work," she said. "Could you still do the green bean casserole and Mom's sweet potatoes? Everybody asks for them." "Still?" I asked. She looked at the tree instead of me. "I mean, like always." I told her yes. Then she mentioned the children's gifts. Emma wanted a beginner bicycle. Luke wanted a large building set that cost more than any collection of plastic pieces should. Sarah and Jason had recently replaced their furnace. She reminded me. And December was tight. "Could those be Grandpa gifts?" she asked. "Or Santa gifts, if that's easier. They're still young enough that the label matters more than the receipt." I should have noticed that sentence. Instead, I saw my grandchildren's faces and said I would handle it. Before leaving, Sarah loaded 2 of my serving dishes into her car. She said she wanted to make sure nothing got misplaced during the morning rush. I assumed she meant the rush between her house and mine. On Christmas Eve, I baked the sweet potatoes, assembled the casserole, glazed a ham, and placed 2 pans of cinnamon rolls in the refrigerator. The bicycle was hidden in my garage beneath an old sheet. The building set was wrapped beside my tree, along with 2 books I had chosen personally for the children. Sarah had not given me a clear arrival time. She had said they might come later than usual because Jason wanted the children to wake up at home. At 8:30 on Christmas morning, I texted her asking whether 11:30 worked for brunch. No answer. At 9:15, I called. It went to voicemail. I told myself they were dealing with batteries, torn wrapping paper, and children who had eaten chocolate before breakfast. I put coffee on and warmed 1 cinnamon roll as a test. I remember standing at the counter, eating it over a paper towel because setting the table for 1 felt too honest. Then Facebook gave me the answer. Linda had posted 6 pictures with the caption, "Christmas morning in our new home." There was Robert pouring coffee beneath the stone fireplace. There was Jason opening champagne in the kitchen. There were Sarah, Emma, and Luke in matching red pajamas. In the last photo, both children stood with Jason's sister and her family beneath a banner that said the whole gang was together. The post had been up for 40 minutes. I looked around my own living room. 5 stockings hung from the mantel. The train was running in a slow circle under the tree. Diane's Christmas record had reached the end, and the needle was clicking softly in the silence. My hands started shaking. I turned the record player off because I needed 1 sound in the room to stop. When Sarah finally answered, I could hear people talking behind her. "Dad. Hey, Merry Christmas. Are you at Linda and Robert's?" There was a pause long enough to answer me. "Yes. We ended up doing it here." "When were you going to tell me?" She lowered her voice. "His parents have a nicer house. We thought you wouldn't care where we celebrated." "Where we celebrated?" I asked. "Sarah, I'm not there. It wasn't meant like that. This was just easier. Jason's sister is here, and his parents wanted their first Christmas in the new house. We thought mixing everybody might be awkward." "Awkward for whom?" "Dad, please don't make this a big thing today." That was when I asked what time they had decided I wasn't coming. She said, "It wasn't a specific time. Was it before you asked me to cook?" Another pause. Behind her, I heard Luke shout that someone had taken his controller. Then Jason said something I couldn't make out. Sarah whispered, "Can we talk later? We were going to come by for the food. Jason can be there around noon." I looked at the serving dishes waiting by my back door. "No," I said, "don't send him." "What do you mean?" "I mean, don't send him here. Dad, there are 14 people. Linda planned around what we were bringing. Then the people attending can solve it." She exhaled sharply. "And the kids presents." That question settled something in me. Not because she cared about her children. Of course she did. It was because, after I had discovered my empty place, her first practical concerns were the dishes and the packages. "They have presents at my house," I said. "They can open the ones from their grandfather when they visit their grandfather. You know, they think the big ones are from Santa. That was your idea. Sarah, you'll have to handle it." I ended the call before anger made me say something I couldn't take back. For several minutes, I stood in my kitchen, staring at food, meant for a table where no chair had been set for me. Part of me wanted to drive everything over, place the dishes on Linda's island, kiss my grandchildren, and pretend I had misunderstood. That was the role I knew smoothed the problem. Protect the day. Discuss the hurt later when it was less convenient to everyone else. Then my phone buzzed. Jason had texted, "This is unnecessary. Whatever issue you have with me, don't punish the kids or embarrass Sarah in front of my family." I typed 3 different replies and deleted all of them. Instead, I called St. Andrew's Community Kitchen, where I volunteered 2 Saturdays a month. Christmas lunch had already begun, but the coordinator, Denise Walker, answered. "Mark, are you all right?" she asked. She knew I was supposed to be hosting my family. Plans changed. "Can you use a ham?" 2 casseroles. And cinnamon rolls. There was a brief silence. Then she said, How soon can you get here? I packed the food into insulated bags. I also loaded the unopened building set and the bicycle. St. Andrews worked with a nearby family shelter, and Denise had mentioned that they were short on gifts for older children. I kept Emma's horsebook and Luke's space encyclopedia beneath my tree. Those had been chosen by their grandfather, not ordered as props for someone else's Santa display. At the kitchen, every table was full. A pipe had burst at another meal site the night before. So, St. Andrews had taken in more people than expected. My ham was sliced within 15 minutes. The sweet potatoes disappeared even faster. No one asked me for an explanation. Denise handed me an apron and pointed toward a stack of trays. I spent the next 4 hours serving lunch beside one of my former students, a young man named Caleb, who now worked as a paramedic. At one table, a father cut a cinnamon roll into 4 pieces so each of his children could have some. Denise quietly brought him another plate. I didn't feel noble. I still felt rejected. Kindness doesn't erase humiliation just because someone else benefits from it. But the food was being eaten by people who were glad I had arrived with it. And that mattered. My phone stayed in my coat pocket. When I checked it after cleanup, I had 7 missed calls. Sarah's messages moved from confusion to anger. Jason's remained angry from the beginning. The missing casseroles had forced Linda to pull frozen side dishes from her garage freezer. Robert had driven to a convenience store for extra breakfast food. The children had plenty of presents. But Sarah had apparently promised them 2 specific items she had counted on me to provide. Her last message said, "You made your point. I hope it was worth ruining Christmas." I sat in my car behind the church and read that sentence twice. Then I put my phone face down and cried harder than I had since Diane's first Christmas gone. It wasn't only about that morning. I was grieving all the years I had mistaken, being needed for being valued. The next day, Linda Mercer called me. I expected a complaint about the food. Instead, she sounded embarrassed. "Mark, I owe you an apology," she said. "I thought you had chosen not to come." "Why would you think that?" Jason said. "Large gatherings had been hard for you since Diane passed. He said you preferred to keep Christmas morning quiet, but you wanted to contribute some of your traditional dishes." I looked across my living room at 5 empty stockings. "Diane died 12 years ago," I said. "I've hosted every Christmas since." Linda went silent. Then she told me the invitation had been discussed before Thanksgiving. She had asked whether combining both sides would be too crowded. Jason had said he would handle it. A few days later, he told his parents that I would be more comfortable at home, and that inviting me might create awkwardness because Robert and I had different lifestyles. I almost laughed. Robert played golf. I graded essays. Apparently that was now a clash of civilizations. Did Sarah know? I asked. Linda chose her words carefully. She was present for part of the conversation. I assumed the rest had been agreed upon privately. That hurt more than learning Jason had engineered it. He had always been sensitive about appearances. But Sarah knew my house. She knew what Christmas there meant. She had watched me try to copy her mother's cinnamon rolls from a stained recipe card. Linda offered to bring everyone to my house that afternoon. I thanked her and said no. I didn't want a ceremonial visit arranged to reduce her embarrassment. "For what it's worth," she said, "your absence was noticed." It was noticed when the food didn't arrive. She didn't argue. Sarah came to my house 2 days later. She walked in using the key I had given her years earlier, saw the children's 2 books under the tree, and began crying. I wanted to comfort her. A father doesn't stop having that instinct because his child is 40. But I stayed seated at the dining room table. "Jason thought it would be easier," she said. "His dad and you don't have much in common. His sister can be snobby. He didn't want comments about the neighborhood or the size of your house. So he protected me by excluding me. He thought you'd be uncomfortable. And what did you think?" She twisted her wedding ring. "I thought we'd stop by here later. I kept telling myself it wasn't really excluding you if we still came over. After the main meal, after the pictures, to collect the food. That's not fair." "No, Sarah, it isn't." She looked toward the kitchen. "You gave the bicycle away." I told her what I had donated and what I had kept. "Emma asked for that bicycle for months. Then you and Jason can buy it. You asked me to cover it after you had already agreed I wouldn't be included. We had the furnace bill. You also had a choice. You made it. She cried quietly for a while. Then the sadness turned defensive. You could have brought the food anyway. Whatever happened between the adults? The kids were expecting Christmas. The kids had Christmas. I saw the pictures. What they didn't have were 2 expensive items you promised using my money. She stood up and put on her coat. Before leaving, she said, Mom would never have done this. That sentence found the one place in me still unprotected. I didn't answer until she had her hand on the door. Your mother would never have left me home alone on Christmas without telling me. Sarah's face changed. She opened the door, then closed it again. For the first time, she said the plain version, we knew you would still make everything. She whispered, Jason said you wouldn't want to create a scene once it was done. There it was. They had not forgotten me. They had counted on my decency as part of the plan. Sarah left without another word. We barely spoke through January. I saw Emma and Luke twice. Both times when Sarah dropped them off for a few hours. I gave them the books. I did not tell them why the other gifts were gone. Children should not be recruited into adult disputes. In February, Emma asked why I hadn't come to the big Christmas. The plans got mixed up, I said. Dad said you don't like Grandma Linda's house. I put down the puzzle piece in my hand. That's not true, I said. But this isn't something you need to fix. That evening, I texted Sarah and told her the children were being given false explanations. I didn't threaten her. I simply said I would correct any lie told about me. Using calm, age-appropriate words. She called 10 minutes later. Jason joined from the background and accused me of undermining him. Then stop using me as the explanation for your decision, I said. After that, the story changed. Emma later told me Christmas had been a grown-up mistake. It wasn't perfect, but it was closer to the truth. Spring came, then summer. My relationship with Sarah settled into something polite but thinner. I attended Luke's school play. She brought the children to my birthday dinner. Jason came late and spent most of the meal looking at his phone. The biggest change was not dramatic enough for anyone outside the family to notice. I stopped automatically paying. When Sarah sent me the link for Emma's expensive summer camp, I told her what amount I was comfortable giving and let her cover the rest. When Jason suggested a large restaurant dinner for Luke's birthday, I asked how the bill would be divided before agreeing. He still gave. I simply stopped allowing generosity to be assigned to me before I had offered it. Each time, Sarah seemed surprised, not angry. Exactly. More like someone reaching for a light switch that had always worked and finding the room remained dark. In early November, almost 11 months after that Christmas, our family group chat came back to life. Linda and Robert were taking a holiday cruise with Jason's sister. Sarah wrote, Looks like Christmas goes back to Dad's this year. Kids are already talking about the train. Jason followed with a list of possible dishes and a link to a smoked turkey package. I read the messages during my planning period at school. Around me, students were changing classes, lockers slamming in the hallway. The old Mark would have checked the freezer, counted chairs, and started calculating what could be paid for from the next paycheck. Instead, I wrote, I won't be hosting Christmas. I can have Emma and Luke over on December 27th for our own visit. Sarah called before the bell rang. What do you mean you won't host? I mean, I made other plans. What plans? I had agreed to serve Christmas lunch at St. Point 1. Andrews and joined Denise and 2 other volunteers for dinner afterward. Nothing glamorous. Nothing that required a double staircase. Sarah said, We can't fit everybody at our townhouse. Then don't invite everybody. The kids expect Christmas at your house. The kids expect time with me. They're getting that on the 27th. In the background, Jason said, He's still punishing us. I asked Sarah to take me off speaker. When she did, I said, A punishment is taking away something that belongs to you. My house, my labor, and my money never belonged to either of you. She did not answer immediately. Then she said, Very tired. You're right. It was not a grand apology. But it was the first time she had stopped defending the arrangement. They held Christmas in their townhouse. The table was crowded. The turkey came from a grocery store, and according to Emma, one string of lights kept falling out of the window. Linda and Robert returned from their cruise and visited them after New Year's. No holiday collapsed. No child was scarred. The adults simply had to produce the celebration they wanted instead of ordering it from me. On the 27th, Emma and Luke came to my house. We ran the wooden train, made cinnamon rolls, and opened 3 gifts each. Sarah arrived early to pick them up and stood in the kitchen while I washed a mixing bowl. I told Jason we're never doing that again, she said. Doing what? Deciding what you're going to give, before deciding whether you're part of it. I dried my hands. She apologized then, not for the food going missing or for being embarrassed in front of the Mercers, but for leaving me alone and assuming I would hide the wound to keep everyone else comfortable. I accepted the apology. Accepting it did not restore the old arrangement. Now we discuss holidays instead of assigning them. Some years Sarah hosts a simple meal. Some years Linda does. I invite the grandchildren over for cinnamon rolls on a different morning. When there is time to hear them talk, instead of serving 20 people from the kitchen at St. Andrew's. The Christmas meal has become part of my holiday rather than a substitute for it. Denise saves the first tray of cinnamon rolls for the families with children. Mine are still uneven, and I still use Diane's stained recipe card. Last December, after cleanup, I came home just before sunset. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt like a room from which I had been erased. One stocking hung from the mantel. The wooden train circled the tree, and Diane's record played all the way through. I had spent years believing that love meant making sure no one else was disappointed, even when I was the person being left out. What I learned was simpler generosity is a gift only when it is freely given, when people schedule it, budget it, and count on your silence. It becomes a service, and services can end. If your own family invited your help, but not you, would you still deliver what they expected? Or would you finally let them celebrate without using you?